Okay, we start on time, as you know, so let me get going while you flow in from around the world. A very warm welcome to the 174th Security Thought Leadership webinar. And as many of you will know who are regular to this, is one thing we always do is we always take a topic and critique it. And the idea of thought leadership is to tear a subject apart in thinking differently about it so we get a better type of security tomorrow. And as always, I've invited an expert panel. And today we're going to be talking about the opportunities and limits of body-worn cameras. What are the opportunities and limits of body-worn cameras? On the one hand, an essential security tool, and on the other hand, a threat to civil liberties. I've got my three panels who I'm going to introduce in a minute. And once I've introduced them, I will ask them to make an opening statement. 3 minutes when they get to say whatever they want to say about this topic. And don't forget, if you'd like to ask a question, get your question in early. You can use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. And once the discussion has, the opening statements are finished, I'll endeavour to bring you in and introduce your questions. So please, if you want to got a question, use the question and answer button at the bottom of the screen. Without further ado, then, let's go and meet our panelists. We've got 2 Oscars winners amongst the panel today. And the first of those is Dave Cox. Dave, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Martin. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Dave Cox. I'm currently head of security at London Bridge City, which is an iconic estate in the centre of London. Previously, I've run King's Cross estate for 5 years. And prior to that, I was a police officer for 30 years, the last 10 years of which were in counter-terrorism in West Yorkshire.
Dave, thank you very much indeed. Chris, over to you. Please introduce yourself, Chris.
Good afternoon, Martin. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Chris Middleton. I'm a chartered security professional. I'm celebrating 19 years in the sector. And I currently work as a security director for a company called ABM UK. I'm delighted to be on the panel again with you today, Martin. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Welcome back, another Oscar winner. And third, Tom. Tom, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tom Ellis, Principal Lecturer and former Home Office and United Nations researcher. I am still part-time at the University of Portsmouth in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice, but I also run Evaluation Solutions UK, so that's starting to, that's my angle about all of this kind of thing. And I also go to Japan and China a lot for doing different things, but that's not terrible, well, it's slightly relevant to this.
We look forward to hearing more, Tom, as we go through.
Thanks.
Don't forget, audience, if you've got a question, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll endeavour to incorporate your question in the ensuing discussion. And we've got some questions in advance as well. Well, then, let's hear what our panel have got to say. 3 minutes when they get to say whatever they want about this topic. Dave Cox, over to you. Your opening statement, please, Dave.
So I will nail my colours to the mast and say that I am extremely pro body-worn camera. The area I run is public accessible land, and as such they provide me with at least 5 advantages over the normal CCTV. First and foremost, they provide me with audio as well as visual. This is absolutely imperative when dealing with a number of subjects that I'll go through. First and foremost, changes in behaviour. Body-worn cameras, in my opinion, do change behaviour of both officers and the public, but only when they're used early in the interaction. If they are used halfway through, they're almost deemed as a threat to the member of the public, and I've seen situations deteriorate quite poorly. They're portable, so it allows us to take or record at the heart of a situation. They allow hands-free use, which some may agree with this or not, but in medical situations, they allow us to ensure, moving down the line, that we have clinical governance and we can prove what we've done, sometimes in a coroner's court maybe. Suicide intervention. This has been extremely important at LBC. We've probably had 35 interventions in the past year. This has allowed us to strip it back, look at debriefing, training, and improve performance. Really, really useful tool. But it also provides us with a proper record, evidential. This has proved that it reduces my costs because officers are not being called to court because we're getting early pleas at court. Complaints. Unfortunately, the public do not always tell the truth. Also, when we're undertaking searches, coming into events or looking at crime scenes, we can prove that actually we're the ones that are telling the truth rather than some of the spurious complaints that we've got. I understand the concerns re privacy, but as far as I'm concerned, if we get our DPIA processes correct, we get our data storage correct, and we're using good kit that provides us with clear evidence, they are, for me, a complete advantage. One of the disadvantages, Martin, subject access requests have increased, right, as a result of using body-worn cameras here. Last but not least, for the UK, in relation to Martin's law, I see it as a real advantage moving forward, especially when we're looking at hostile reconnaissance, and we can monitor the acts of individuals and provide a clearer picture of those actions to SO15. That's me.
Thank you very much indeed. Really, really appreciate that. So fascinating insights, which we'll come back to in due course. Thank you, Dave. And Chris, please, your opening statement. 3 minutes, Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Again, like Dave, I'm going to advocate the use of body-worn cameras. And I'm going to quantify that statement, Martin, by coming from a point that 10 years ago, I was with the company I am now wearing a different hat. And we were one of the first companies in 2012 to be trialing video badges and first use of body-worn CCTV at the same time as the police were also trialing it. In terms of the premises that we looked after, we had a lot of antisocial behaviour, a lot of issues with youths in particular, a lot of crime. And as soon as we introduced the body-worn cameras, we saw a huge de-escalation in the types of issues and conflict that our teams were coming up against. So to today's point, we saw a huge reduction in crime, and overall our staff felt protected and safe to carry out their duties. I think from a point of view of the kind of the overall piece for me in terms of quantifying that statement even further as the years have gone on, the technology has improved, in my opinion. There's a lot more kit available on the market, and I'm not here to promote any one particular supply, but what I would say is wherever possible, we use encrypted body-worn CCTV for the purposes of making sure that what we have is as locked down as it possibly can be to protect all parties. Again, as Dave said, we've used it with great use in terms of post-incident review. If I was to look at two challenges, the biggest challenge for us is usually clients are very nervous about the use of body-worn CCTV. We have control rooms around the UK. They've got thousands of pounds worth of brand new body-worn CCTV sat in boxes, never used. An incident occurs, and then somebody will ask the question, well, why weren't they using their body-worn CCTV? The second thing I would say to that in terms of the challenge for us as industry is again, clients' budgets. Again, it's always post-incident that somebody will then say, oh, we need to now go and purchase the body-worn CCTV, despite recommendation from us in the first instance. And in terms of my closing comment, if I could, Martin, I think one of the best examples I can give of where CCTV has played a prominent role is for anyone here in the UK, we've got the Pride of Britain Awards this evening. And there are two police officers based in the Midlands who are recipients of the Pride of Britain Award. And it was my team who were on the scene and responded to an incident where these two officers nearly lost their lives. And through the body-worn CCTV evidential evidence we were able to provide, along with that of the police officers who were under attack, these two assailants were subsequently convicted recently for a long period of time. So that's probably the best example I can give of CCTV at its best in terms of body-worn use. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Okay, and now for something I expect to be slightly different. Tom, over to you. Your opening statement, please, Tom.
Thanks. Well, being a typical academic, or just an academic, really, I mean, I don't think it's a yes/no question. No one's, I don't think, seriously, well, unless you've got a vested interest that you've been an offender against body cameras. I just think it's important. You ask lots of other questions about why you're using them and in which context and what you're going to do with them. and how there was some mention there of how you measure whether they're having the impact that you want and what you do with that. I think the other element really is we've had quite a few instances, and there's a very big one in Hampshire that questioned, if somebody takes the camera off you, your evidence is gone. So there's an issue about cloud and streaming and all the rest of it. So very quickly for me, I've done stuff with body cameras in about 5 different environments, only one of which is policing and mental health sector that I've mainly looked at, but also schools, prisons, and had some dealing with retail, which was quite different. So I think in terms of policing, what's very obvious from the research that I've done is you've got quite a difference between the context which we've spoken about in the UK, which is evidence collection, which has always been the agenda here, with an assumption that officer behaviour is relatively unproblematic. And I think, despite all the news in the last year in particular, that's largely true if you're comparing it with countries like USA, where really, and China, where they've really introduced body-worn video cameras to control police officers who are not behaving legally in a large proportion. The French have banned the public filming police officers instead of issuing body cameras, which they did start to do. Mental health sector, I think a lot of agreement between mental health patients and their guardian stroke relatives and the NHS staff. It was generated from let's use it there. It's cut down use of tranquilizing injections, which is the very heavy end of intervention. And that has a cost reduction to it, as well as things like staff injuries, etc. But there is a kind of blowback from that on the people who are not involved with that process, who tend to have a bit of an ideological objection to it and say it's very invasive. Schools was another one, even more problematic use of body cameras in schools. It's very hard to get across the idea that you're using body cameras to actually identify problems and get help and reduce the reliance on discipline processes, which frankly aren't very evidence-based. So you get mum's net attacking you without really knowing what you're going to do with the cameras. And the prisons one, we've got some, there is a study on prisons here that the MOJ did. I advised on the methodology, they ignored that, and I've done an FOI for freedom of information request with the student that we did it with, and that's still not been answered. But what we did generate from that was that the prison officers are actually more prepared. We did get a survey done of our own. Prison officers are more prepared to say, yes, I behave better, I can do better. It actually has an effect on their processes. Whereas the stuff that I'm aware of with police officers is really saying, well, I'm not going to really answer that in a particular way because it implies that I wasn't doing my job properly before. So you've got that element, which says something about the two cultures. Retail, my biggest surprise was that they didn't care. Maybe I've gone in naive into the private sector, profit-making organisations, and they didn't really have any way of measuring whether it was reducing shrinkage, as they call it, which is theft from the shops. In other words, did it improve their profits, and were the cameras worth it? So there's lots of different contexts and different ways and reactions to the use of it. I think the big problem is that people still think it's like CCTV, which in this country really people largely accept now. And because it's up close and personal, they think it's more invasive. But I think the whole issue is to consider that CCTV is more invasive because it's filming everybody all the time and it's on all the time. Whereas body cameras are only used in the circumstances where it's appropriate to do so, and then they're switched off. So I'll leave it there. That's kind of my perspective.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you, panel, and generate a lot of interest already. So let's start at the beginning here. Let's get this privacy issue under discussion, because it's not insignificant. And Tom, let me just come to you first, perhaps, since you've just raised this. Do you think that the security world has underestimated the privacy concerns? I mean, is there a genuine reason to worry about this? I'll just give an example. I was in a retail outlet recently, and a member of the public complained to the security staff using it saying, hold on a minute, I didn't, you're filming me shopping. Well, it was just in the background, right? So there are some genuine issues out there. Justified? Tom first.
Well, again, I think it'll depend on the way that the video. If you're using your camera and filming when it's not necessary, proportionate, or and the three elements that the law basically is used and for the information commissioners, etc. It shouldn't be on all the time. If it's on because you've actually spoken to them and said, right, I'm going to film you. I mean, in Hampshire in particular, you actually know it's on because you can see you've got like a selfie facing back at you. So it would depend on, are you walking up to that person you've already switched the camera on and they can see that, but then maybe there's a reason for that, but you also need to explain what that reason is. I think like, sorry, it's gone off the screen. Is it Dave Cox?
Yeah.
What was saying, if there's a too big a gap, or I mean, it's almost the opposite what he was saying. You turn up with it already going. You need to quickly explain why, or you should switch it off if there's not a reason to be using it. I think that's the issue.
Okay, well, let me come, Dave Cox. Dave, do you think the security world has underplayed in its excitement about the benefits that you've outlined? Has the security world underplayed the concern about privacy? And Chris, I'm going to come to you with the same question in a second. Dave first.
Martin, I'm going to say no. I don't think it's been underplayed, because actually when you look at the processes that we need to put in place to protect people's privacy with your DPIAs, ensuring that your data storage is secure, I think that everything is being put in place now to protect that privacy. But I will throw a question back. Is your privacy more important than yours, mine, family safety? I don't think so. So I think as long as, and I'll agree with Tom, as long as the use of the camera is justified, proportionate and necessary, I don't think we are underplaying it. I think we understand it and we're putting the documentation in place to show that it's not underplayed. Okay,
Chris, would you agree?
I would agree, and some of the panelists may think this is probably one of the quieter, more boring ones of these, Martin, because we're all agreeing, we're all getting on far too well in this debate. But I would temper that with, I think we lead the way in terms of privacy. I think other countries look to us to see how do we do it. And again, I spoke with a client only recently regarding a subject access request following an incident. And this particular individual decided that she was going to make an allegation of assault against an officer. And subsequently, when the police reviewed the footage of the alleged assault on her, it transpired she was arrested for assault on the officer, not the other way around. So, in terms of that use of data, she's now, questioning the use of the data and how was it applied. But I think absolutely, if it's done correctly and followed through, Martin, I have absolutely no issues with the privacy.
Well, let me just tell you this. Why then did you say clients are leaving them in boxes and are a bit nervous about them? What's the barrier there?
Because again, each client will may have had a good experience with them. Others may have had a bad experience, and it's the majority of clients that I've seen across the United Kingdom in my time in this sector have got them in a box. They bought them with good intention, and then somebody has gone, oh, there's been something on a social media site where the footage is not great, and therefore it's made them nervous and they've decided not to go with it, Martin. But overall, I would say it's absolutely essential for those in the front line.
Okay, let's move on, because I'm sure we're going to come back to this in other guises. Dave, let me come back to you. Simon Cham, interesting point he says here. Since the House of Commons in the UK, of course, has been televised, some might allege MPs grandstand when speaking in Commons as a result. Have you seen any of this sort of acting out for the purpose of being captured on camera? In other words, Dave, are there instances where it can actually make things worse rather than make things better?
I think if you go online now, that you've got Audit UK, etc., that come in to try and elicit a reaction. For me, looking at the teams that we have, it's getting our team to understand that could actually occur, that people might grandstand. But what it does do is it tempers the attitude of the officer. So what you find, in my view, you find the officer suddenly becomes a lot politer, right, and tries to become a lot more reasonable. At the end of the day, Martin, when you're dealing with something like that, whether there's a camera on or not, we have so many mobile phones around at the moment that everybody's on and filming. And we've seen that with recent terrorist attacks. They'd rather film something than run away.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. This. I mean, Tom, let me come to you on this. I mean, from an academic perspective, Tom, this issue about surveillance and being seen. I mean, you can understand there's a lot of ways in which people are being seen these days, and I just wonder whether we've just treated this just a little bit simplistically, or whether we've really got to grips. And you gave an example in different environments, okay, where people have behaved differently and reacted differently. It suggests to me that perhaps we've got a bit more understanding to do of the nuances of this technology, about its good and bad points. We haven't got there yet.
No, I mean, the first study we did, it was actually before the College of Policing existed. It came along and Hampshire said, right, we're going to give body cameras to everybody. And there's that point at Christmas, you can't just buy a camera, stick it on, film something and hope for the best. And like Dave was saying, it's more about the back system. You know, the cameras are good enough for most purposes now. Well, you've also got, everybody's got one of these in their pockets. It's probably more powerful computer than the cameras, but not attuned to the system that they're feeding the information into. So one of the things we noticed, we did a quick, what would be called a Delphi study now, and the experts that were gathering, we questioned them. They thought it would have a big impact on antisocial behavior. And, you know, drunken Thursday and Friday night seems to be every night now because I'm getting old. And you're not going to, that's where you might get what you might call grandstanding, because, you know, once you've had alcohol or a combination of alcohol and something else, you're not making rash decisions. You're not really deterred by the camera, but you have got the evidence. The officers then got the evidence of just to prosecute you. So your convictions of those sort of offences, where in the past, because I'm old, I've been out with the police in the 80s and the 90s, you know, where it used to be a bit of shove and the offerage, and if the shoving back got bad enough, you get arrested. Otherwise, you couldn't be bothered to do the paperwork. I think so that's one context where it's not really grandstanding. It just has no impact on people's behaviour if they've had too much to drink. In other circumstances, it will make them suddenly think, or it might capture. Usually with domestic violence, you're not actually filming the event itself, but when you're turning up to the incident, you know, you've got the obvious evidence of what's happened since, and the way you ask the questions is quite important. So you need to record that. And if you get that wrong, you can spoil your case. So cameras have a downside as well, in that if the officers aren't properly trained, or they think they're trained to interview people and they're not, they can actually make things worse. So there's all sorts of elements and context that you have to consider. It's not a simple give someone a camera out the box and off you go. And there's not a simple issue about civil liberties. I mean, American Civil Liberties Union actually started off with the idea that officers had to have them on all the time. They couldn't switch them off. They were like CCTV cameras. That included going to the toilet, having your refs break and everything else. And then all of a sudden they've got this huge amount of data that was embarrassing. They're redacting huge amounts of stuff as well. Different states have different purposes. Fresno have got these. They've got iPhones that can fasten to the officer's belt for when they do, because they do a lot of traffic stops with guns in America. So you want that at the window, but then you can hook it up. Brazilian police doing the same thing. So it depends on horses for courses, really. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it's not just either cameras and your civil liberties are threatened, or no cameras and they're not. I don't think it's quite that simple.
Interesting answer. I appreciate that, Tom. Thank you. Going to come to a big one with you, Chris. And Jay Jordan has asked about the return on investment here. Okay. I just wonder whether we could talk through with you how that's calculated, how that's added up. Is there actually a pound or dollar figure for how more effective these cameras are? I suspect not. I suspect it's understanding the nuances. But when you're speaking to a client, why might you sell it as a benefit?
We simply sell it as a benefit, Martin, for the reasons that, you know, we've tried to cover the upsell of the benefits of the cameras, and particularly around the protection of reputation. of the client that we're operating within, and it's there to protect their reputation, their brand, and our officers ultimately. And I think once that's understood and we understand how much could be lost through reputation and risk through there being a one-sided view of somebody going on their phone, filming an incident, uploading it within seconds to the web, and that will only ever show that 5-second image. It will never show the 20 minutes that was the precursor to said incident. I think clients have definitely got more savvy and gone with, yeah, okay, we see it as a need. As I said, I still make that statement that there are those that don't, and they wait for the incident to happen and then ask the question. But then to your other point, Martin, the other thing that we are seeing, coming back to Tom's piece around retail and shrinkage, we are now in a position as industry that we are starting to report on the amounts of incidents we're dealing with and by type. And when it does come to the shrinkage element of thefts and those that are detained through the elements of shoplifting and being caught in the process via the body cams as we go to stop them, we're then able to quantify how much that shrinkage is per incident that we deal with. So we're able to go back to clients at the end of the year and say, through our intervention, we were able to save your business and return goods to the value of X. Yeah. So that is a quantifiable thing our clients are seeing. But I think the biggest thing for me, to Dave's point, in an area where, it's public realm, if we save one life anywhere in the UK through the intervention of one of our officers going and approaching somebody who's in crisis, and we're able to evidence and get that person back from wherever they are and pass them over to the emergency services, and then review that incident post-incident and share that with colleagues, and then upskill and train other colleagues to then be able to go off and do the same thing. That, to me, and that one intervention is priceless, in my opinion.
Okay, Chris. Dave, all very well to Chris outline those sort of benefits, but I wonder whether there's a reality that Tom just spoke about. All very well and good, providing the officer on the front line gets it right. Any sort of mismanagement, this could backfire completely, surely. Is there a danger of that, Dave? Do you think there's the security world in its broader sense hasn't always known for being very, very good at managing on the front line?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. We're human beings, right? The police go out there, the security teams go out there, and they do make mistakes. Now, if they're making mistakes, what we have to do is determine whether it's a character issue or whether it's a genuine mistake. And if it's a genuine mistake, you learn from it. But at least by having this type of equipment out there, because when the officer comes in, the chances are he knows he's now on camera, he knows he's messed up. You're more likely to get him to interact and to learn than if not. Otherwise, you get full and frank denials and you go round and round in circles. So yeah, we can mess up. But as I said to you before, everybody's got a mobile phone, Martin, and Chris has alluded to it. They'll put the 15 seconds on where we're not quite getting it right, and they've missed the previous 20. So we have to accept that there's a risk, but I don't think that risk is big enough for us not to use them.
And maybe it drives up standards, Dave. It forces you to.
Look, I've interacted in situations, and I know that I'm being filmed. So you change. You do physically change the way that you interact. And it does make you more professional.
Yeah, okay.
Could I just
Tom, please do.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to the question about if you're the client and you want to bring body cameras in, and then you're asking the question, what's the benefit to me, or how I'm going to? I mean, you should know what you're looking for. I mean, that's what I find as a consultant. If I go in, very often I do a scoping study usually first, because actually the problem they've got, they're either not very clear on, it's something to do with this, or they're asking the wrong question. So, and the first thing my bugbear in a way, although I'm making a living out of it, is that their own data systems are not set up to do the sort of thing that Chris Middleton was talking about. So, you have to end up helping them. I mean, the police were particularly bad. And, you've got so many different forces here, all different systems. NHS and schools, much better data, but nothing set up for those linkages to actually answer the question. They're saying, well, how can you prove to me it's going to be useful? And I'm sort of there going, well, how are you going to share your data so that we can actually do that for you? So the client's got a responsibility rather than just stacking a load of cameras in a box. That's what happens if you don't think that through.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm going to move on at this point because we've got a lot of questions coming in. I want to see if I can cover them. Chris, I'm going to come to you here. Now, John Hilditch raises a good question. There may be a risk with CCTV cameras linked to how they are made and where they are made, such as the camera parts being linked to surveillance regimes of hostile states. Could body-worn cameras be the same? And Tom, I'm going to come to you in a minute, given your experience on this issue. Chris, is that a concern in the security world, and should it be?
I think it absolutely is, and without mentioning the aforementioned name of one particular supplier, it is definitely a threat. And having recently been at Thames House on a very interesting debate about this very subject, about state threat, it very much is, and it goes beyond the body-worn cameras, as we know, and you can even trace it back to things such as your Ring doorbell. If you really want to go to that level of detail, Martin, that you've got. People can go and buy a Ring doorbell now and have stuff on their mobile phone with absolutely no encryption or the stuff that we have to do as a regulated industry. But again, I would leave the more technical answers to those that are better and academically equipped than I. But yes, it's very much when I'm looking at it, there are only certain people and suppliers I will go to for that very reason, and without obviously mentioning those names.
Chris, would you have a Ring doorbell?
I don't have one for the very reason I don't trust it. No.
Okay, interesting. Tom, this sort of question lined up for you in a way, mate. I guess your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, I think it's quite important to distinguish between CCTV and body cameras. I think they're rolled together. I think that's part of the problem we were talking about earlier, that probably as an industry and probably as the organisations that use them, we're not very good at explaining to the public exactly what's going on with the cameras. You have to go and look for it. So, I mean, that's probably why people oversimplify. I think in terms of, I mean, there's all sorts of problems with, I mean, what's going on with police officers often is they're filming the CCTV footage in a shop of an incident on their cameras because the shop owner doesn't really know how to download this stuff. Now, if you look at the provisions as they should be, I mean, I don't know, to be honest, because I'm not a lawyer. I'm asking my lawyer friends about this. But if you've got one of those doorbells or you've got your own CCTV outside, as I understand it, you're supposed to be a registered data manager. Now, how many people that have those CCTV or doorbells, I don't know if the doorbells don't count or whatever, but according to, what I understand, you're supposed to be a registered data manager, and you're supposed to, and therefore, if the police officers are filming that CCTV footage and the shop that isn't registered properly, is that really admissible evidence? Are you backing up, certain? I think it's very lax in terms of how we apply those rules.
But should, Tom, we be worried about, for example, China? Should we be worried that if there's a real danger here, this could all fall into the wrong hands?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's been watching Capture. I presume a lot of people have been watching Capture and editing footage, and that's a whole new dimension. Obviously, you've got to worry about the technology that you're using. I mean, a lot of the cameras are outsourced for manufacture and then coming in. We used to export lots of CCTV cameras to China. Now, I presume the opposite is happening. I'm not so up on the manufacturing side of it. So, yes, you need to. I think that's why you've got all these regulations around which cameras you can use and what functions they have. Or things like, I mean, one of the discussions is why don't we use infrared? So you can see, well, we're not using infrared. That discussion's been had, because if you do, it's a bit like the slow motion argument with football. When you see it in slow motion, it's obviously it was intentional, it was a foul, because it's a lot slower, it slowed down, it seems a lot worse. If you've got infrared, then you can say, well, the officer should have done A, B, and C, but the officer couldn't see what you're seeing on the camera. So therefore, you might get a load of people, you might start to employ, get cameras with infrared, which kind of seems like a different solution, and then is actually a problem. But who's seeing it and who's not seeing it it's a big issue in the market. So that's why you've got those regulations.
Okay. Dave, I'm going to read you two questions which are covering the same issue. And the insinuation, I think, is that this is being oversimplified. Nicholas Evans says, I don't like the thought that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. And on this basis, the use of body-worn cameras is justified. This has all sorts of civil liberties. And Dr. Glenn Kitteringham, a former panelist, says, this is the old age comment. If you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. I, for one, consider my privacy to be more important than my safety of myself and family. Without privacy, we have no safety. Not a question, just a comment, but they're both along the same lines there, Dave. And this is one of the issues, I think, for the security world, which these two have put better than me, is that we tend to think security and safety is the priority, but privacy matters to a lot of people.
I totally agree. I don't think anybody's actually used the word that privacy isn't important.
I guess it's your point, Dave, about the trade-off. You know,
right, and there is a trade. Right, and there is a trade-off. But there's a trade-off with everything in life. Now, I will refer to you now Martin's Law. Okay, in the UK, protect duties coming in. Okay, I pose the question. And it's not a case of if you're not doing something wrong, there's nothing to worry about. However, with Martin's Law coming in, for people like me, public safety is becoming increasingly important. Now, I look after your privacy by ensuring that my data storage is secure, that my reasoning, my justification, proportionality, etc., is in place. So I do consider it. But in life, when you look at the Human Rights Act, right, there are trade-offs all the way along in every single principle. So, yeah, I get it. We could have a conversation about facial recognition, which can be now placed on these cameras.
Yeah.
All right. So you look at facial recognition and you go one step further. The question is, do I need to do it? Probably not at the moment. So we are making those judgments and we are being called to book to get them. I will say this, when I put my business case through to my client, it took me 9 months to prove to them, right, that my data storage was right, my processes were right, that I could respond to subject access requests. So it's not that it's being dismissed, not in any shape or form. It's being considered.
Okay, let me go, Chris. Same question, Chris, because I think it's an interesting one, right? Which is being raised here. It's okay, security world. You're all about making people feel safe. The bit you got to get and buy into, and we don't always feel it does, is this bit that privacy is a bigger deal to some people. It's not just about making us feel safe no matter what. It's okay. That's not okay. Chris.
Again, similar to Dave, I'm not here to say that, privacy is to be underestimated. It's each to their own, I'd say, Martin. And that I would quantify that statement again with an example that most people don't even think about the fact that they're being recorded as they move through life, in whichever guise, going through airports, getting on a train. Every day in your everyday life, you are being filmed somewhere. We don't usually think about it. The only time it comes to the fore is usually during or post an incident. And then the natural thing is, my vehicle's been hit. Oh, has the neighbor got CCTV or a Ring doorbell? Or if it's in a shopping center or an event complex, I want to see the CCTV. There must be some. My bag was stolen. So the privacy element is absolutely important. But again, people most of the time are not fussed about the privacy element until they become a victim of a crime. And at that point, the privacy element goes out the window, and it's like, well, what about my privacy? What about my person? I'm a victim now. So that's where our safety element comes in. And today's point, it's all about proportionate use. And if you've got well-trained officers with the correct encrypted equipment who will only use it as a last resort, when it's pretty much a dynamic risk assessment has been carried out for you and the people you're dealing with, and it's in the interest of all parties and it's proportionately used, I would have to say, I'm sorry, but that takes precedent over the privacy element in that circumstance.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Interesting debate on that one. Tom, I'm going to come to you. We're running out of time, and I want to get this question from Mike Gibbs, and it's maybe a sort of a question for a scholar here. And Mike's question is this: isn't the privacy concern that officers will find a reason ex post facto to justify camera uses? I mean, the police are alleged to do this for traffic stops. The car was moving erratically. And it's an interesting dilemma here, all right, about whether this is one of those issues behind the scenes that is quite serious, but we just don't think about it and it's difficult to prove. It's an interesting one just to sort of add some light to. Tom.
Well, I suppose there's an issue there about provocation, in other words, that's not filmed, and then is that what the question's about? And then you're then filming the half of the incident that where something's a problem.
I suppose the point is, Tom, is that if you can film a lot, right? Yeah. Then you find something, and after the event you justify it.
Well, it depends.
There's a danger.
It depends how much of the incident you filmed. I mean, I think let's roll it back a little bit. I know I haven't got much time, but I mean, those questions about body cameras are really questions about CCTV. I know we can get facial recognition, but only if you switch it on a body cam. So all of those questions have been rehearsed regarding CCTV and dash cams in America and USA. This is really about, do you switch the case proportionate, legitimate, necessary, on or off? It's not being filmed all the time is the point. So you have to have a reason to do it. This question is more about, I would say, is a question about buffering. So buffering is this. So your camera's on all the time, but whenever, but it's going to keep dumping. It's not going to keep those recordings until you press the button, and then it's got the last 15, 30 seconds or whatever it is. And then that's an argument as well. So you can't just switch your provoke someone and then switch the camera on. Now that is still quite controversial, or still argued about and contested. I think buffering should be used, but at the same time you've then got technical requirements, your battery will run out, etc.
Okay, Tom, very quickly, Chris, a question from Ubaid Khan, who's clearly overseas. Very quickly, are there any extra regulatory requirements about using body-worn cameras as opposed to other types of cameras? There's nothing extra, is there, that you've got to go through regulatory-wise that apply to body-worn cameras specifically?
Not here in the UK. Everything we already do falls under the Data Protection Act and GDPR, and we're very, as I said earlier, we're probably the leading experts in terms of the data and the amount of administration we need to follow to stay within the confines of the law in terms of releasing that data. And I think that's why other countries look to us as exemplars of what we do around CCTV and body-worn cameras, in my view.
Okay. Final question. Question for each of the panelists. I'm so sorry that we've run out of time. Just want to say that Mark Allen makes the point that there may be a lack of confidence in the law that undermines the use of these cameras in certain circumstances. Many other questions we're not going to be able to do justice to today. Question for you all, just in 10 seconds, I wonder whether I can summarize. Body-worn cameras, what's the potential going forward? Is this an enormous development in terms of how they're going to be used, or have we seen it reach its limits? Chris first.
I think it's only going to grow as a market, and it's going to get more enhanced and more developed. And I'm already seeing examples of that with people in petrol stations as cashiers now wearing body-worn cameras. As an example, I didn't see that 2 years ago.
Yeah, good point. Okay, Dave.
For me, I think the tech is improving. You look at the edge technology with facial recognition, the ability to transmit straight into control rooms. And I think the competition within the industry, body-worn industry, it's going to push the tech further and further forward. Whether it's accepted or not, Martin, might be another question.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And finally, view, Tom.
Yeah, I think it's not just the tech. It's actually different agencies having different levels of tech and integration. So big problems between Crown Prosecution Service, use of police evidence, for instance, and disagreements about what counts as evidence and what doesn't. So it's not just about the technology, but it's how you integrate it into the other agencies' systems, which in criminal justice is several agencies, and also that data collection and connection issue as well that I mentioned earlier.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Fascinating conversation. I'm so sorry we didn't get through all the questions, just too many. Really, really appreciate it, panel. Thank you very much indeed. Excellent discussion. And we're going to be coming back to this topic in due course. Just a few final points from me, if I might. Just to say that upcoming events on the 14th of November, the Tackle Economic Crime Awards, on the 15th of November, the German Oscars, on the 24th of November, the Canadian Oscars. That's going to be online. There's going to be a thought leadership webinar beforehand. So tune in to both those. On the 15th of December, the Cyber Oscars, and on the 23rd of February, the UK Oscars. Get those dates in your diary. We're back again in a couple of weeks when we've got a webinar about the effective management of security incidents. Is security maximizing its potential? It all starts, they say, with getting an understanding of the incident, interpreting it well. And some are saying security is not very good at that. Well, we'll be debating that with 3 panelists in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much, and once again to the panel. Thank you very much indeed to the audience for all your questions. Really, really interesting debate. And as I say, we'll come back to this in due course. And until we meet again, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.